Hi, this is Kristin Mason, and this is video journal number 2 for human behavior in the social environment on the 6th of November, 2015. Today's video journal is going to hopefully answer the questions: what factors put individuals at risk when making the transition into adulthood, and the social work interventions that can help. So we're going to start off with some of the risk factors, or factors that put individuals at risk when making the transition. Some of them are going to actually be things that have happened earlier in life, which, as we know, can contribute to our life course journey throughout our life path. So the first one is low family income during infancy. How this can affect the transition later in life is that if resources are not available to families with young children, the children may suffer through malnutrition, through poor health care, moving from place to place, not having a permanent home, and those issues can resurface when we are transitioning into adulthood. Poor reading achievement by age 10. If children are unable to read appropriately as they need to, they won't be able to get adequate jobs. They will be frustrated. They may have a little less confidence and self-esteem, and all these things can contribute to the transition into adulthood. Problematic school behavior during adolescence. Some kids don't realize that, how they behave in school can relate to later in life. They get a reputation and not a very good one. Sometimes this is overlooked, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it carries with them. So being able to cope with skills to manage behavior is important. Another one is adolescent health issues. Some children become very sick at a young age, and this can be detrimental to them learn coping skills. Maybe some children have chronic disease and they're in the hospital a lot, so they aren't out there learning skills in their environment, their social environment, their community, because they're stuck in a hospital. So some of those health issues can cause issues transitioning into adulthood. It delays the process. A history of maltreatment or abuse, and lack of interventions or interruption in services. So if a child grows up in an environment that is abusive or maltreatment, maybe neglect, some of these things can contribute to some issues when it comes to adulthood. Some kids, when they reach adulthood, they cease the services that are helping them overcome, and manage coping skills in an environment where there's been abuse or maltreatment. These days, everybody wants to keep the families together, but sometimes that's not in the best interest of a child, and part of that can go into even foster care experience. So if an experience in foster care is really good, and children are getting the support they need through services, through the family, through extended family, they're better able to manage and learn those coping skills to transition into adulthood. So they may be exposed to some really positive role models in that environment, and even siblings, per se, not necessarily like related siblings, but siblings in that foster environment that can help them learn positive skills to transition into adulthood. Some of the, also in family dynamics, generally speaking. So if you grow up in a single family home, and you're seeing the support of just one parent, maybe the other parent's absent and they have nothing to do with the family situation. So lacking that other additional parent in their perspective can also be a risk factor in transitioning to adulthood, because you don't have that other role model, that either male or female role model. Specific to men, Living with an alcoholic or mentally ill father, and this is actually true for women too, can be a risk in transitioning into adulthood. We think of our fathers as strong beings, the family provider, and when they're broken down because of drug or alcohol abuse or even mental illness, that strength is not there, and it makes us question how we can cope in the future and how we can manage, when we don't have that strong father figure there. Another thing for men, an excessive number of stressful events that can cause health issues. We know even as people age, a lot of stressful events and the inability to cope with several events, especially if they happen concurrently, can put a lot of stress on your body. It can cause, heart issues. It can cause blood pressure issues, and anxiety, discomfort, all of those things. Men, if they've abused substances themselves or are alcoholics themselves, that can be a big factor, risk factor in going into adulthood. Might be partying a lot with friends and just, missing work, missing classes if you're in college. And it delays, it sets it back, because then you have to say, oh, I've got this problem, I have to get counseling, I have to go through all this, and that puts back, going back into the workforce. So those things for men are typically through the research that was done and presented in Hutchinson, our textbook. Adolescent fatherhood, that all of a sudden you're thrown into adulthood, but you're not quite an adult yourself, so you're managing, oh my gosh, I got to raise this child, I have to support this family, and you miss a step. You jump right into fatherhood, but you may not yet be an adult. And this can also cause, especially if the young adult is in school, this can cause delinquency in school, because now they have to go out and work. For women, sibling death early in childhood can be a risk factor in transitioning into adulthood. There might be some underlying issues there where they might even feel responsible, not that they did anything to cause it, but that lingering guilt may follow them. They may often wonder what it would be like to have the sibling around, and so they're kind of stuck in this childhood fantasy of what it would have been like to have their sibling around. Another one, living with an alcoholic, well, we already talked about that, sorry. Conflicting relationships with mother. Mothers and daughters sometimes just clash. And if the mother is a strong person, sometimes the daughter feels like she can't quite express herself. Or the mother did it this way, or the mother did it that way, and has these high expectations of the daughter. There just can be conflicting, yet the daughter wants to be independent. So there can be that conflicting patterns, and when it comes to transitioning into adulthood, it's like we want our mothers, we want to be able to, become friends with them and be able to discuss things with them, but yet we're still their daughter. So, and we may be more independent than they were, and that can be a conflicting. We're risk takers and we're seeking new opportunities, and our mothers may be more passive, and they may not have jumped into taking those chances like we might at our age, or younger, into adulthood, to take a leap of faith, basically. So some protective factors that can be involved are the temperament of a person, their health, obviously, social and family support systems that are available, the ability of a person to cope and move through stressful events that can help with the transition into adulthood. Early language and social skills, as well as physical development. So the stronger we are emotionally, physically, mentally, I think I already said socially, sorry, and our education, we're going to have those tools built in that we've learned in our experiences and be able to transition better into adulthood and the responsibilities therein. Good problem solving skills. So, when you're an adult, so to speak, you're going to be on your own. You've got to make your own decisions. You have to weigh the options and the risks and make a decision based on your own best judgment. So you need those skills built in, or learned rather. They're not always built in. Some people have more capabilities in making good judgment decisions than some others, but education, obviously, and if you really have a good, strong sense of what you want to do by age 18, some of the studies say that builds a better foundation for transitioning into adulthood. And then you have, people like me that are in our second careers, and I thought I knew what I wanted to do, but hey, life changes, life happens, and some of us, like I know some of you out there, are following your passions in the second round. Social maturity, that's another positive protective factor, and a sense of mastery and control when you're in early adolescence. So if you're already more mature, and unfortunately some kids have to grow up really fast because of their family situations. They have to develop skills at a very young age to be able to cope with their family situations, and they almost jump right into adulthood and miss out on their childhood. So, and that's a whole other conversation, because that can cause issues in the future, and when they have had their families and help their own families out and moved on, sometimes they might regress. And I guess this could probably be related to your life crisis when you turn 50, like going out and buying that Jaguar, or spending all your money on a Tahitian vacation or whatever, but along those same lines. So I know I'm going way over, but I want to get to the social work interventions. And one of the key things that I saw in the reading was that the war veterans, the young war veterans coming back from war, and it is a life and a career choice, and some of them go in as late adolescents and come back as they're transitioning into adulthood, and have suffered injuries, have suffered post-traumatic stress disorder because of events that they've had to endure while over at Afghanistan or Iran. So for social work, we have to understand that for many of these young veterans, they've kind of spent their young adulthood or emerging adulthood, late adolescence, away from normal, what we would call normal society, and they've been in a very structured environment and fighting for their lives, basically, depending on what they were doing in the war. So we need to understand that and be able to be prepared to have knowledge of positive support systems like the VA and Wounded Warriors Project, some of those organizations that help veterans cope and manage when they come back from war, in order to then help them get into a positive situation for adulthood. Other recognizing early intervention programs at an early age. So even starting before, when you're working with clients and you see families and young children, starting way back, so for interventions. Initiating mentorship programs. This is a really great idea, not only in the social realm of things, but also in work. So if you're working with a young adult and they're looking at career choices, you might suggest internships or mentorship programs, even educational ventures, hooking them up with somebody in a field that they're interested in. And also socially, mentorship. somebody that's been there, done that. Maybe they're struggling, and there's somebody that you know that might be willing to pair up with this young adult emerging into adulthood. Maybe they've had this similar pasts, and I know confidentiality and everything goes along with that, but you could develop a support group that would be willing to do that, and it could be a very confidential group too. So seeking support and initiating parenting programs. So for some of the teens that become pregnant in high school, some of those things, managing, growing up yourself and raising a family of your own. So some of those support groups can be initiated and organized. Supporting cultural and family values and differences. Helping young teens, what did I write here? Helping and support teens and young adults in development of healthier relationships. So, being a good role model yourself, but also organizing some educational programs that can help young adults in building positive relationships and staying away from unhealthy relationships. One of the questions that was asked in our work this week was about, I think we were answering something along the lines of, what happens when an addict or an alcoholic comes, they've been through their treatment and they're always going to be alcoholic or a substance abuser, but even though they don't use, but they're going to have to deal, I guess I'm wanting to say they have to deal with it for the rest of their lives. So having positive relationships in those scenarios and keeping them away from the enablers and the codependents that have brought them into a not so healthy environment, and seeking other interests. So pairing up people with similar interests to support each other and build a foundation for connections, positive connections. Also, what social workers can do is they can collaborate and initiate and coordinate the community and social and community environment, family and educational environment, and also the work environment, and coordinate programs that can really help young adults in achieving adulthood and supporting them throughout that transition. So it looks at it in a more holistic piece. So I know I went way over, and hopefully that's okay. I'm so sorry, but I got a little wordy. So thank you for listening.